As well as being Pro-Vice Chancellor Entrepreneurship and Dean of Business School, Noel is also an active member of Norwood Rotary. Members of Adelaide Rotary, please let's welcome Professor Noel Lindsay.
Thanks, Kelly. And it's indeed a privilege to be here, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about a topic that I feel very passionate about, and that is entrepreneurship. It's been with me since I dropped out of school at 16 when I learnt to set up my first business, which was a roaring success. But by the time I was 18, I was destitute, the business had failed. And it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it taught me that I needed to go back to school and learn about entrepreneurship and learn about business generally. So I did do that, and ironically, I'm a chartered accountant, a CPA, and I became a company liquidator and specialised not only in the insolvency or liquidation, winding up companies, but also in corporate recovery with a national firm of chartered accountants, Ferrier Hodgson and Co. But I've always loved entrepreneurship. I love starting businesses, building things, but I also feel passionate about teaching others about how to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, about believing in yourself, the power of one, that you can make a difference in the world if you believe enough in yourself, and you can hang around with the right sorts of people there who will support you to do so. And so I find myself at the University of Adelaide in a fantastic position. I just love what I do. I love my job. I have a lot of freedom to do, and I have a big impact in helping others achieve what they want to achieve, particularly in the entrepreneurship area. So I asked today about what I was to talk about, and so Kelly said, well, talk about some of the things that you're doing at the University of Adelaide, and I'm very happy to do that. But one thing I do want to say is that Adelaide, South Australia, is a very entrepreneurial state, a very entrepreneurial city. There's an incredible entrepreneurial ecosystem in Adelaide. While I'm talking about the University of Adelaide, other universities, University of South Australia, Flinders University, and indeed even Carnegie Mellon and Torrens University are all doing things in the entrepreneurship space. When I first started off in this area, entrepreneurship was frowned upon a little bit. It was members of the White Shoe Brigade, people who are a little bit shonky, sort of engaged in entrepreneurial sorts of practices. And thank goodness people have appreciated that entrepreneurship is so important to what we do. It has a major impact upon developing economies, and not just at an economic level, but also at a social level as well. And of course, it helps to facilitate innovations that improve our quality of life. So what I want to talk about ThincLabs and some of the things that we do at University of Adelaide, I do want to acknowledge what happens at the other universities and other components of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in South Australia. First up, many people don't have a good understanding of what entrepreneurship is and also what innovation is. And innovation and entrepreneurship go hand in hand here. So I just want to explain what that involves. There are many explanations of what entrepreneurship is and innovation, so I'm going to keep it very simple there. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about our ThincLabs and what they are. Many people may not know what they are, and our eChallenge Pre-Accelerator program. I've taken a couple of these overseas. Why did I do that? And where are we now? So that's basically it, and I understand I've got about 10-15 minutes to do this in. So let me talk about entrepreneurship first. If you can't read the writing, it doesn't really matter. But entrepreneurship, there are many explanations of what entrepreneurship is. Very simple very simply, I like an explanation by a Harvard University professor back in the 1990s rather, named Howard Stevenson. And he said, entrepreneurship is the process of creating or seizing an opportunity without regard to the resources that you own. It's a process of creating or seizing opportunity without regard to the resources that you own. And why I love this definition, this explanation, is because many people were thinking about going into business. They're very focused on, well, how much money have I got? Can I actually get myself into this business? But what I've learnt, I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I had my own businesses and still do, but I also help set up, the university set up businesses as well. And the one thing I've learned consistently is that if you focus on the opportunity and get that right, and you focus on an exceptional opportunity, and you put together an exceptional team of people, a cohesive team of people with a common, clear vision of where you want to go, then the money, the resources will follow. And so I think many people get it around the wrong way. They focus on the resources. Have I got enough money to start off a business? And I think that's stinking thinking. I've learnt the hard way myself that it's about the opportunity, the quality of the opportunity, and the quality of the team. Now, entrepreneurship is just not about businesses, standalone businesses. We have different types of entrepreneurship. There can be, most of the businesses in the world are actually what we'd call necessity type businesses. They're started by necessity entrepreneurs, people who don't necessarily want to go into business, but they're maybe socially or economically or challenged or neurologically challenged, and so they set up businesses because they have to, because they can't get a job. There may be no jobs there. And so they have to be resourceful and set up businesses of their own. And so I spent quite a bit of time working in disadvantaged communities in South Africa, working with little kids who drop out of school often by year 8 because many of them, their parents have died of HIV, AIDS and the like, and they're living in little shanties there, pieces of tin pulled over their head or tarps pulled over their head, one piece of clothing and one meal a day there. And most of those kids drop out and they turn to crime. And so we've had a very successful program and actually working with these kids in trying to actually develop a more entrepreneurial mindset so that they can take advantage of their potential in life. And so from the necessity point of view, really important, it's just not about people who want to go and set up their own businesses. So which you read about in the press, you know, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Richard Bransons, the Bill Gates and so on. They're people who set out to set up a business because they wanted to. But I can tell you, most of the businesses in the world are set up by people because they have to. So we can actually look at entrepreneurship from that perspective, but we can also look at entrepreneurship on another dimension as well. It's just not about business entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is really important too. So if social enterprises, charities and the like, you know, the funds, the mainstream, the traditional sources of funding where you'd put your hand out and the government would actually provide you with funding to do so is drying up, it's dried up. You have to be entrepreneurial in what you do. And dare I say, you know, Rotary is a bloody good example of a social enterprise here, where we actually facilitate social entrepreneurship. This is a great cauldron here for actually facilitating social entrepreneurship, social innovation in our community there. And we've been doing it for many, many years, as we all know, and a long time before the terms became actually popular there. And then if I can talk about another dimension of entrepreneurship, it's about corporate entrepreneurship. There are many unsung heroes who engage in entrepreneurial activities in government, larger corporations and the like. And they do entrepreneurial things. They may not necessarily get all the credits for it, but they actually help their employers to push out the boundaries there. So, and to develop more successful entrepreneurial businesses. So entrepreneurship has many different dimensions, but putting all that very simply, if you trying to actually visualise what's an entrepreneurial business look like, because not all businesses are entrepreneurial. If they were, everyone would be, all the people behind those would be multimillionaires, and that's not the case. So if you look at the graph that I have here, if you're looking at, say, a successful, perhaps a non-entrepreneurial business or less entrepreneurial, it would be perhaps like the pinkish, mauve, purpley sort of line there. And if you're looking at a more entrepreneurial business, it's more the blue line. So more entrepreneurial businesses tend to have a much steeper growth rate there because they're doing some unique things. As I mentioned earlier with my explanation of what entrepreneurship is, these businesses are built around exceptional business opportunities. They're built around exceptional teams. But of course, there's something else, another missing ingredient that I haven't talked about or just touched upon, and that's innovation. Innovation. Now, once again, many people don't quite understand what innovation is. They think it's about something new. You invent something new. And that's half right. It's partly right there. Innovation is about newness. But if no one wants your newness, the thing that you've developed, then it's hardly innovation. There are two dimensions to innovation. Something new that the market wants or the consumers want. My dad is in his 80s, and he was a mad inventor. And when I go back, he's in a home now, and I have to go and I'm cleaning up his workshop at the moment. And he's got all these great things that he's invented there, but none of them have ever seen the light of day. And so they're inventions, they're not innovations. And so innovation is involves both an idea, something novel, as well as a perceived value on the part of the consumer. And it's only where these two things intersect, the newness and the perceived value, is what we have that we can call innovation. So now, having said that, I do want to talk about what we're doing at the University of Adelaide, but I want to talk about what's behind the entrepreneurial thinking here. I also, in another life, I've been involved in venture capital with one of Australia's oldest venture capital firms, CVC, in Sydney. And so we invested in many businesses, but most of the ones we saw we didn't. Hundreds we see on a yearly basis, but we'd only invest in maybe 5 or 10 of those each year. And so what's the name of the game? How do entrepreneurs, if it is so important, and it is to developing economies, to developing people, what's the essence of being successful? Well, it's really, really quite simple, but it's harder to implement. I can talk about it in a simple fashion. So when you think of it, someone has an idea, whether it's, I talked about some great entrepreneurs, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, whatever. They started off their businesses just with an idea in their head, an idea about building something there. And so they'd spent no money on the thing, and they owned 100% of that business. And then as they decided, they may have done a little bit of work on it. Is there a market here? They may have done a bit of market research. They may have actually developed up a business plan or so for their business, invested a little bit of money, spent a bit of money on the thing. So the idea actually started growing a little bit. And then if it actually had real potential, then they may have actually decided to get some people to invest in the thing. And so they've lost equity in their business now. But because of that, they've got someone else to invest, the pie has grown. And so the red area there reflects the equity that they've lost, the ownership. And so it goes on until you may end up with a smaller slice of the pie, but the pie has grown. And that's the essence of entrepreneurship, growing the pie while acknowledging that you may lose value in your ownership in your business. So saying all those things, how do they fit with ThincLabs and eChallenge? So this is behind what we try to inculcate in the people who exist in our ThincLabs there. And we have 4 of them. Our first one, in its modern form, is set up on the corner of North Terrace and Pulteney Street. Its origins go back to 1993, when indeed one of your members here, who was a registrar at the University of Adelaide, Frank O'Neill, actually was instrumental in setting up the very first ThincLab business incubator in Australia. And indeed, ThincLabs is, I've been told, the oldest business incubator in Australia, if not Australasia there. Set up in 1993, it is now 26 years old. A visionary, Frank, wherever you're sitting there. Yeah, hands off, my cap off to you there. And so that spread, it was at our Theberton campus, and indeed ThincLab was... I tried to come up with a name, the modern name for it, and indeed ThincLab is an acronym. The TH stands for Theberton, the I and C stands for incubator, and the lab stands for laboratory. So I still wanted to acknowledge the early roots of Theberton Incubator there. And so we've moved from Theberton to the city, our headquarters. I've just opened up another one on our Wake campus at Urbray, which has an agriculture, food and wine focus. And then I have two other ones, one in France, in the Champagne region, in the town of Chalons-en-Champagne, and another one in Singapore. And the last three have an agriculture, food and wine focus there. And although we will speak to other people, we'll take other businesses there. And these incubators involve a physical space. We have over 50 mentors who volunteer their time in Adelaide. And I noticed Stuart here is one of our 50 mentors there who give up their time. Stuart and himself is a successful entrepreneur and an example of the sorts of people who are involved there, who actually provide support. So, and then we run a series of entrepreneurship workshops and training programs there. And these intersect the sorts of training programs we run. We call them the E-Challenge, Australian E-Challenge. And these run from ideation, where we teach people design thinking, how to come up with ideas for developing your business, to creativity, innovation, to prototyping, where we teach people how to develop prototypes in two areas. So one, perhaps in the electronic space, where we'll teach you how to develop up apps, electronic prototypes, apps, electronic games, software. And then we also have 3D printing, where we teach people how to 3D print objects there as well. And then we start off in plastic, and then we can go right through to titanium if we want to, and that if that's what you need. But we also have our pre-accelerator program, the Australian E-Challenge, which teaches people how to develop up strategies for developing their businesses, to accelerator programs, which after you've got your plans to start your business, then how do you start the business, and then how do you ramp up that business to scale it up. And so once again, we operate not only in Australia, we operate in France, in Paris, Nice, Strasbourg, Lyon, Chalons-en-Champagne and Troyes, in partnership with other business schools and engineering schools there, and Singapore there as well. And so why international, you may say? Why do we want to go international? Well, I'm not from Adelaide, I'm not from South Australia. I came here in 2003 for 2 years. And I got here and I thought, Adelaide, Hicksville. There's no tall buildings, you know, because I was born in Sydney, grew up in Brisbane. So I thought, I just want to get out of this place. But I had a business in South Africa. I set up Bond University in South Africa, which I owned, and then I sold that to a listed company on the stock exchange. So I had a little bit some success behind me, and I thought, I just want to set up another business somewhere, and I'll come here and park myself in Adelaide for a couple of years, and I'm out of here. Anyway, long story short, it's now 16 years later, and I am one of Adelaide's strongest supporters. I just love South Australia and Adelaide, and I'm torn between telling people about the great state and the great city we live in, to telling people nothing about it interstate, because I don't want them to find out what a great place it is. So international, I was posted to Singapore to run our Singapore campus there for a couple of years. and I found out that many people didn't know where Adelaide was. So one of the things, I did a couple of things. I produced a series of MOOCs, massive open online courses, which go global, and we had students from all around the world, 196 countries enrolled in our MOOCs. We had over 300,000 learners enroll in them, in entrepreneurship, project management and risk management there. So our ThincLabs and eChallenge is another way of promoting South Australia and Adelaide to the world. But also it's about helping our local entrepreneurs go global. We just won a $500,000 grant from the federal government to train up 60 businesses here in Adelaide to help them develop up international strategies for going overseas, and then to take 18 of those companies and help them locate in France with a view if they want to go into Europe, and or Singapore if they want to go into China. So there's funding there for them for 12 months. But it's also about helping our students develop up more entrepreneurial mindsets. So in the business school, which I've just taken over as dean, every student in the business school will do at least one entrepreneurship course. And if you're interested in setting up your own business, and I know not everyone will, but if you want to set up your own business, you'll actually do entrepreneurship while you're learning about entrepreneurship. So you'll sit in our ThincLabs, either here or overseas, working on developing your business while actually doing a degree with us. So when you graduate not only with a degree, but you graduate with a business as well. And if you want to go down the corporate entrepreneurship route and go and work for somebody, then we'll actually help you work with employers to work on corporate projects there and provide you mentoring support, so that you, as an undergraduate student, you may actually have an entrepreneur who values what you've done in terms of helping them develop their business. Of course, I work in the university. I feel passionate about research and innovation, and it's about helping our researchers develop up new innovations. And importantly, we've developed up incredible relationships in the countries, in the communities that we operate in. And we have other communities wanting us, who have asked us to come in our ThincLabs to help set up businesses there. The reason why we're in France, to be honest, let me just explain, we didn't put our hand up and say we wanted to go to France. The town of Chalons en Champagne approached us. And what happened there was that they had a military regiment there, it was an artillery regiment initially set up in Napoleon's time and set up in the Champagne region. And the French government a few years ago ran out of money to fund that regiment, so they shut it down. They lost over 2,000 jobs. So they heard about what we were doing in entrepreneurship in South Australia, and then asked us to come and actually help create and stimulate the economy there. And we've had a great impact in that economy. So progress, just winding up. Where are we at the moment? We've got a town of Reggio Emilia in Italy has approached us about setting up one of our ThincLabs there, and in China we're also looking at possibilities there, and potentially India too. And more locally, I see with our medical school, I see a great demand for setting up a ThincLab in the medical space there to help our medicos develop up innovations for our surgeons and the like. Any questions? Yeah.
Thanks, Noel. One of my friends challenged social media with a question. Entrepreneur, just a couple of days ago, Martinez, he said, are entrepreneurs born or do you develop into an entrepreneur? My experience is that family, and it's absolutely fundamental, but also the school maybe that you go to. Some school will be more really focused on that because you've been in an environment where you're more surrounded by that. What is your view on that?
Sure. I mean, I think the important thing is, it's not whether someone's an entrepreneur or not an entrepreneur. I think it's whether someone has an entrepreneurial mindset, an entrepreneurial way of thinking. And you can teach people how to think in an entrepreneurial way. Like, if I had more time here, I mean, I could teach you about, how to identify business opportunities. I mean, I mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship is built around exceptional opportunities. And as a venture capitalist, I mean, we only looked at two things. We never looked at the innovation, although that was just a given. The innovation was given. Two things we looked at was, is there an opportunity there for a start? And you can teach people that. So opportunities are underpinned by things like a need for the product, that you've got a sustainable competitive advantage, some sort of unique selling proposition for what you do. The market's ideally growing rather than contracting, although there are opportunities even in contracting markets there. You've got a fantastic team of people who are cohesive, who pull behind you in that, and there are key distribution channels to get your product out to market. There are many more, and in fact I've developed up an app which is with Shark Tank, a television program which is we've used to help train up kids in high schools with, but also with entrepreneurs. So I'm good off the track there. You can teach people about entrepreneurship, about developing an entrepreneurial mindset. It's like you can teach people about accounting or law. It's whether they actually want to go out there and practice it or is another thing. I mean, you know, I guess the easy way, and many people sort of say this, is that, you know, entrepreneurs are partially born and they're partially made there. You've got to want to embrace this sort of thinking there. It's not for everybody. You know, if we had the world full of all entrepreneurial people, it'd probably be a madhouse there. But you need people like, you know, I'm torn. I mentioned I'm a chartered accountant, a CPA, so I have my left brain, which is the more rational thinking of me, and the right-hand brain is more the creative side of things. So I go through this tugs of war. You need people who will say, "Oh, come on, hang on, just hold a minute, just question that." But you also need these other people with the entrepreneurial mindset to say, "No, we can do this. I see the big picture. I see the vision here." So you need all sorts of people. Yeah.
Professor, thank you. On Monday evening, I steeled myself to watch another episode of Q&A. I'm glad I did because the CEO of Cyrone was a guest, and he had on the desk some wonderful pieces of innovation and invention, and talked about the gap between innovation, invention and implementation, and the fact that bringing things to market was often done overseas and offshore, not in Australia. Back in the South Australian context, our media loves looking back longingly at the Hills Hoist and the frog cake and all the things we did in the 50s and 60s, but we don't hear enough about what's happening right now. What role does the media have in terms of changing our view on inertia and complacency and actually getting behind entrepreneurship?
Yeah, media plays a big role. There's no doubt about that. The traditional forms, of course, television, newspaper, but you know, for the younger generation, it's all about social media and that. And so, you know, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, I think these days you can't ignore social media and getting posted up on you know, the different platforms there. But of course, you've got to, you know, there's you can have the greatest invention in the world, but if the world doesn't hear about it, you know, then you're in steep trouble. And indeed, there was a guy who talked about, you know, the great mousetrap fallacy, you know, which was that if you develop a better mousetrap, the world will be the path to your door. And that's not the case. You've actually got to show your mousetrap to the world, and the only way you're going to get that out there is by through the various media outlets, the traditional and the non-traditional there as well. Yeah.
We have one more question because close to the time.
Thank you, Professor. I think you would agree that all successful entrepreneurs never lose sight of the original objective of the business or the organisation which they're fostering. Yes, they're very good at growing them, yes, they're very good at promoting them, etc., but they always keep in sight the original objective. I want to ask you a question, if I may, as a very senior academic, about our universities, who, it seems to me, in fact I think it's incontrovertible, that both sides of politics have required our universities themselves to become much more entrepreneurial. My question is, have some of the universities lost sight of the original objective, which was to produce really good academic results and really good graduates, rather than simply looking after the bottom line?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I've got a good answer for it or not, but certainly the environment's changed. Government money has shrunk in terms of what's available to support universities. So our core business still remains, depending on the nature of the university that you're associated with, but I think all 40 or so universities in Australia, their core business, their mission is about educating students for the future, and it's about undertaking research. Now, out of those 40 universities, the group of 8 or sandstone universities, which University of Adelaide is one, we also have a very strong focus on research there, and I don't think we've lost our focus there. The group of 8 universities, they're the only ones responsible for developing Nobel Prize laureates, they're Nobel laureates. And indeed, the University of Adelaide's got 5, and it's the highest number in Australia. We've got more Nobel laureates than any university in Australia. So, but all our universities are exceptional, and they all focus on developing leaders for tomorrow and research innovations. There's no doubt about that. But the world has changed. Money is drying up. So we actually have to be more entrepreneurial and embrace, take a page out of the entrepreneurial handbook there. So we've got to look for other ways to actually fund ourselves. And so doing things overseas is partly, one of the reasons why we do this, in terms of looking for students, overseas students, trying to attract them here, for instance, trying to actually get support, financial support to support our research. If I can just put in a plug for the University of Adelaide, we are the only university in Australia that has been accredited as an entrepreneurial and engaged university, number 1, and number 2, out of the 40 universities, were ranked this year as the leading entrepreneurship education and engagement university there out of the 40 universities, independently by La Trobe University, actually. So. We have to, I hear what you're saying. I don't think we've lost sight of our core values. It still remains about students. It still remains about research. But we live in a bigger community. We have to engage, we have to have impact, and we have to look for entrepreneurial ways of doing things. And we have to put that mindset into our students as well, and our researchers.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Lindsay, on your, that was an outstanding presentation. I think we'll all agree, and your passion, no wonder you stayed in Adelaide. It's obviously something you love doing, and